Ever get that, like, I don't know, weird feeling, like something you swear you remember just isn't how it's supposed to be?
You mean like when you could swear Curious George had a tail?
Exactly. And everyone's looking at you like you're the one who's wrong. Well, that, my friend, could be the Mandela Effect. And today we're taking a deep dive into this super interesting phenomenon. We're using this List 25 video, 25 insane Mandela Effect examples that will blow your mind as kind of our guide.
Yeah, the Mandela Effect, it's basically like this kind of collective glitch in our memories, right?
Yeah.
Where a whole bunch of people vividly remember something that, well, turns out never actually happened.
It's like our brains are playing a giant prank on us.
Yeah.
And it's always those things we feel like we should know, like pop culture stuff, brands,
Yes.
even historical events.
Exactly. It's not like forgetting where you put your keys. This is like next level memory messing.
Right, like being certain that Nelson Mandela died in prison, which, spoiler alert, he didn't. But we'll get to that later. For now, let's dive into some of those Mandela Effect moments that make you do a double take in the grocery store. You know, those food and product mishaps that make you question if you're losing it.
Oh, yeah. Those everyday ones are actually a really good example of how our brains can kind of like accidentally combine similar memories.
Our brains are like efficiency over accuracy.
Pretty much. Our minds are always looking for shortcuts, trying to make sense of things quickly, so it's easier than you'd think for those mental files to get a little out of order.
Speaking of out of order, let's talk Fruit Loops. How do you spell that? 1-O or 2?
It's fruit with one O. Officially, at least. That's how it's been since, let me see, I think it was 1963 when they, like, relaunched the cereal.
See, I bet a bunch of you are thinking, hold on, that's not right. And you wouldn't be alone. I mean, the List 25 video even says that tons of people remembered it as Fruit Loops with 2 O's.
It sounds better that way, you know?
Totally. But here's the thing. Kellogg's actually did use the double O way back when,
Really?
like in '59. But then apparently they got sued and had to change it for a bit. Eventually went back to the single O, though.
Which is probably why people get it mixed up, you know? That initial exposure to the double O, even if it was short-lived, it can really stick with you.
It's like our brains have this, like, mental echo chamber. Double O, double O.
Yeah, and it plays into this thing called the exposure effect. We tend to, I don't know, we just like things more if we've seen them before, even if it was just a quick glance.
Fascinating. Okay, so our brains are already pretty good at messing with cereal boxes. But then there's the Chex versus Chexes debate.
Yeah.
You add the S?
Oh, man. This is a big one. Officially, it's just Chex. Always has been.
And yet, I know there are people out there who are adamant that it was Chexes on the box.
Right, and the video even mentions that. Like, it just feels right to say Chexes when you're talking about a bowlful.
It's those little squares, man. They just scream plural.
It's like our brains go into autopilot and just, I don't know, pluralize things when there's more than one. Like it's some kind of grammar rule.
Makes sense to me. Our brains love a good shortcut. But sometimes those shortcuts lead to, well, these memory mix-ups. Now let's switch gears from cereal to sandwiches. Were you a Jif peanut butter kid growing up or a Jiffy?
Jif. It's always been Jif. Though I gotta say, I totally get why people get that one wrong.
Right. Like, I swear I can picture that little cartoon character on the Jiffy jar.
It's funny how those things stick with you.
It's like our brains saw Jiffy popcorn and just decided that peanut butter needed a little piece of that action.
Exactly. It's that whole memory fog thing again. Similar brands, you know, they get all jumbled up in our heads.
Our brains really said, let's just make them all Jiffy and call it a day.
Pretty much. But speaking of things that mess with our minds, let's talk about the Kit Kat hyphen. Or should I say, the lack of a Kit Kat hyphen.
Oh, man. Tell me you remember that hyphen, too. Between Kit and Kat, it just looked right.
Oh, I totally remember it. And like a lot of people do. It's a classic Mandela Effect example.
It's those little details, you know, the ones that shouldn't even matter, but they totally throw you off.
A missing hyphen, an extra letter, it can really make you question everything.
Like, what else have I been wrong about my whole life? Okay, get ready for a wild ride, because now we're heading into some pop culture puzzles that really make the Mandela Effect feel like we've entered an alternate dimension.
Oh, here we go, down the rabbit hole.
Exactly. And we're better to start than with the most famous line in movie history, right? Luke, I am your father.
Star Wars, always a classic.
Right. Such an iconic line, printed on everything. But, and here's the kicker, Darth Vader never actually says it like that.
Nope. The actual line is, "No, I am your father."
No, I am your father. So close, yet so different.
Right. It's crazy how many people get that one wrong.
I mean, I could have sworn on a stack of lightsabers that it was, Luke, I am your father.
It's like that whole thing with the gist of things, you
Uh-huh.
know? Our brains are really good at remembering the main idea, the feeling of something, but not always the exact words.
So our brains prioritize the dramatic reveal over accuracy. Got it.
Basically, it's all about efficiency.
Speaking of efficiency, did Sinbad star in a genie movie in the 90s? Or am I making that up? Because I feel like I remember that very clearly.
Ah, the Sinbad Genie movie, another Mandela Effect classic, and no, that movie doesn't exist.
People swear they remember it, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
specific details and everything.
Oh, yeah. And this one might be a case of our brains playing a little trick called confabulation.
Confabulation. Sounds serious.
It's not as scary as it sounds. It's just our brains trying to, like, fill in the gaps, create a complete story, even if it means making stuff up.
So our brains are basically little screenwriters coming up with their own versions of events.
In a way, yeah. It's like there was a Genie movie from that time, Kazam, with Shaquille O'Neal.
Right.
So maybe those two got mixed up somewhere along the way.
Our brains were like, 2 basketball players, 2 genies. What's the difference?
Something like that. Okay, one more pop culture head scratcher before we move on. Tom Cruise. Risky business. Sliding across the floor in his socks, sunglasses or no sunglasses.
Okay, so picture it. Tom Cruise, white socks, the candlestick. Were there sunglasses?
It's such a classic scene, I can see why people would add those sunglasses in their memory. Makes it even more iconic, right?
Right. But nope, the movie confirms no sunglasses. It's like our brains decided to give them a little extra flair.
Maybe all those parodies messed with our memories. Who knows? But it shows how easily our brains can be influenced.
It's true. Okay, ready for another one. This one takes us from Hollywood to, well, the world map. Where do you picture New Zealand?
Oh, this is a good one. The List 25 video talks about how a lot of people get this wrong, actually.
It's like our brains looked at Australia and said, you know what you need? Another island buddy.
Exactly. And they put it way further east than it actually is. Some folks even think this is proof of, like, alternate universes or something.
Right. Shifting timelines. I mean, it's fun to think about.
Definitely. But realistically, it probably comes down to how our brains understand maps. We use mental shortcuts, visual cues, and those can easily get distorted. Like maybe you saw a different map once, or you have certain ideas about geography.
Or maybe you just really, really want there to be another island out there.
Exactly. Okay, last but not least, let's talk about the Mona Lisa. Is that a smile on her face, or what's going on there?
Right. It's like, is she amused? Is she thinking about what to have for dinner? We may never know.
The Mona Lisa and her super mysterious smile. Art historians usually call it ambiguous or subtle, but I swear some people remember her with, like, no smile at all.
It's amazing how one painting can create so many different interpretations. Yeah. Like our brains are all trying to figure it out in their own way.
And that's the heart of the Mandela Effect, don't you think? It shows us that our experiences, our memories, they shape how we see the world, even something as simple as a movie scene, or like you said, a painting.
It's like we're all putting together a puzzle, but we might have some different pieces. So if you ever find yourself questioning a memory like, wait, did Nelson Mandela really die in prison? You're not losing it. You're just experiencing the wonderful weirdness of the Mandela effect. It's a trip down memory lane, except the lane might have a few detours.
Exactly. It makes you think, what other little quirks are hidden in our memories, right?
Right. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the Mandela effect. If you have your own examples, we'd love to hear them. Because let's face it, this is one rabbit hole we could explore forever.